think I'm really cool. All I wanna do is impress you with my mouse trap. All I wanna do is convince you with my cheese. All I wanna do is be the coolest cat here, but I'll need some more super breed. Just watch me, mouse. Just watch me catch you. Just watch me, mouse. Just watch me catch you, catch you, catch you. All I wanna do is impress you with my mouse trap. All I wanna do is convince you with my cheese. All I wanna do is be the coolest cat here, but I'll need some more super breed. Oh, but I need some more super breed. Oh, but I need some more super breed.
Hello, MouseHunt. Welcome to Feedback Friday. Today is Friday, August 6, 2021. Pretty sure that's what year it is. Hello, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. My name's Dave. Hopefully everybody in the chat is doing well today. Looks like there's 113 people hanging out. Hello to everybody. Hello, hello. Michelle, Jonathan. Jonathan says hi to Michelle. Ryan, hello to you. Morning back to you as well. Eric, hello, hello. Alex, Ben. Ben says the best Feedback Friday ever. Oh, well, we'll see what we can do. Jason says, yo, well, yo, right back at you. Environmental Soup says good morning. Well, hello to you, Environmental Soup. Miko, Andy, Sean. Oh, it is Dave FBF. Nice. Oh, well, glad to hear it. Well, today I thought we'd get some feedback on Ronza's latest visit, as well as we've been collecting a lot of kind of notes, feedback, thinking ahead even to next year of kind of maybe a few changes here and there we want to make. So, start thinking about your impressions of Ronza's most recent visit. Want to collect a little bit of feedback there. As well as on the new edition of the Airship Hangars on Hunter Profiles, and kind of see a little open-ended question of where maybe we might go with that in the future. Alex, I await news on Ronza's rockets. There is some breaking news in the news ticker if you're playing in the web browser, but we might get into that a little bit later as well. Well, first up here at Ronza feedback, and so one thing that we were kind of toying with a little bit while we were putting together Ronza this year, but ultimately it was kind of too late to make a decision on, so we kind of tucked it away for next year potentially, but want to see what players think. Is getting rid of the 1 week of lead up before she actually lands, where the chrome bits start dropping, but it's a week before she actually lands her ship and her shop opens. Now, if we were to do that, it's important to stress we'd increase the drop rate of chrome bits. So it'd be the same overall number of chrome bits, have same opportunity to collect just as many, but maybe just shorten down into a 2-week time span. So, in the chat, do you feel like 3 weeks is a little long for her to be sort of around, or chrome bits to be dropping? Keeping in mind as well, there's that 1 week of sort of final shutdown where chrome bits are going to stop dropping. Ronza's still there, though. You can use all of her shops and cash out your chrome bits. A little bit of context. I think years ago when we explored the chrome bit format, originally we were a little worried, well, if the chrome bits don't drop until she lands, then when she does, when she's there, like on day one, you don't have any chrome bits, so you can't interact with that portion of her shop. But I mean, realistically, a lot of people spend their chrome bits toward the end, although certainly lots of people have already spent some chrome bits. But you always kind of, at the end, take stock of how many you collected and do one final buy anyway. Mark asks, are Chrome Slayer maps retired, at least for the time being? They haven't been returned in at least a couple of years. SGC says, I don't have the School of Sharks, so I'm saving my gold this year. I'm such a bad procrastinator. It's a nice upgrade for sure. School of Sharks does come in handy. KDM says, hi Dave. Hi back to you, KDM. Victor says, just sad about the School of Sharks skin. Definitely, there's a lot of really cool skins for that trap. That might be a topic for a future day as well, exploring the idea of being able to use cosmetics for any trap. It kind of comes up as a suggestion frequently. It's in the idea bank. It might give a little bit more life to different traps and skins, but there's some creative challenges to work through because trap skins are very similar to a sort of idea of a cosmetic override. Tarako says chrome bits dropping early is just fine. Alex says, big fan of party size chrome. Our round robin finished all 10 in 6 days. Wow. You were doing some hunting for sure. Caleb says, I like 3 weeks personally. Interesting. Game says, shorter chrome bit period with higher rate definitely sounds better. Okay, a little bit split decision there. Alusa says, no, we need 4 weeks or even more. Brian says, hello to you, Brian. Welcome. Daryl says 3 weeks is great. Gives all players time to still build gold for items you may have that can't afford. Yeah, okay, interesting. 3 weeks is less stress. But now, if the drop rate was a little higher, so you still have the same opportunity to collect just as many chrome bits, would it being shorter, if you feel like, hey, I better hunt a little extra more while these chrome bits are around before they go away, then, if that's spread out over 3 weeks, isn't that kind of more time where it's sort of high impact of like go? It's hard to get a feel for, how long before it starts to feel, it's getting a little bit old, or how would the 2 tickets work then? Exact same way. Again, wouldn't change how many, the drop rate of chrome bits would increase if we did something like that. So it wouldn't affect your ability to collect the 200. You would just be able to do it in a quicker amount of time, or shorter amount of time. Spagar says transmogrification when? Exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't heard that term. I always kind of used like cosmetic overrides or something, but I hadn't heard that term before. Mouse hunters were suggesting it, so if you're familiar with that term, yes, that sort of idea where you can make a trap look like another trap, maybe within the same power type family or something. But some rough edges. It's in the idea bank. Like I said, maybe a topic for a future day. Ronza lands, but I find I have no reason to pay attention again until she leaves. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right? There's not really specific objectives. It's not, necessarily what she's about. It's pretty chill. Good fit for kind of passive gameplay. People are on holidays during this time, so give more time. Yeah, that's a good point, Tarako, as well. So, even if you can only fit in 1 week or 2 weeks of hunting, at least it's spread out over 3 weeks, so, you won't be away. You have time to participate. ALV asks, when's the next MouseHunt album coming? Probably never, but I guess never say never. Lonely Sailor says, can we have limited edition skins for the existing traps on next Ronza visits? Limited edition skins for the existing traps. Potentially, yeah, interesting suggestion. Diamond Knight says, like hunting early because we like to shop more when she arrived. Okay, so that's interesting. Kind of confirmation. That was the original inspiration behind having them drop before she actually lands. So when she does land, you have some chrome bits to spend. Is that fun? Do you feel like something would be missing if that wasn't there? Miko says, I do like chrome bits dropping before. It works same time, a little extra time to get some gold. Okay, I think the getting gold part could be alleviated by announcing she's coming, but chrome bits don't necessarily need to drop. So, because the only difference would be kind of chrome bits per hunt, I guess. Pirates of Caribbean Chrome School of Shark Skin sounds amazing, says Jonathan. Bishop, more bits, fewer weeks will make RNG spread worse. I think it would actually have the opposite effect. The higher the drop rate is, the sort of less deviation there is in the sample. So, but I think it was a good point. The sort of how active you are. If you happen to be away, that's very impactful. If you miss 1 week of a 2-week event, is much more impactful than having to miss 1 week of a 3-week event. So. That's some good food for thought, definitely to jot down in our notes there. Ryan says, it's sad to see some hunts don't give chrome bits. I'd like a shorter duration, but 100% drop rate. That's a little tricky up at 100% in that you almost feel like you need to go back to the meadow, and that's not very fun, or you need to find an area where you have a very high catch rate if it's all 100%, whereas right now it's kind of adjusted. The stronger a mouse is, the more likely they are to drop chrome bits. We might be able to achieve that with quantity, though. If it was all 100% drop rate, tough mice could drop more than one. And the nice thing about that is it's a little easier to gauge feedback. At least for me, when I'm hunting, Quantity is plain as day. When a mouse drops 3 instead of 1, I know, cool, that was much better. But it's a lot harder to sort of get a feel for, okay, this drops it 70% of the time, and this one drops it 30% of the time. It's a little more nebulous. Chrome says, personally, I think that the idea of upgrading, chroming your traps by paying mere gold is a bit stale. Yeah, it's definitely kind of ingrained in the identity of a long time in the game. Chris says 3 weeks is great because it gives margin for error. One busy day at work doesn't mean I miss out hugely. Yeah, very good as well. Even thinking just as small as that, you have a busy day, and the shorter the event is, kind of the more impactful that becomes. So that's actually a great point that's coming up in chat. Swift says, could we use an unupgraded skins for upgraded traps in the future? That as well is kind of chilling out in the idea bank. Again, a few rough edges. There's some traps where there's a skin for its regular and its upgraded version, and it just kind of needs someone to put in the design time to kind of smooth out all the rough edges, audit all the skins and all the traps, and kind of make that work. But functionality-wise, it's rather easy. I think the time commitment there would be in the design side of things, pulling it all together, as well as some interface work. Obviously, all the interfaces of skin selection would need to be updated and reimagined just a little bit. But it actually kind of works that way. If we remove a little kind of check somewhere in the code, remove one if statement, all of a sudden you can equip any skin with any trap. So it kind of works, but obviously it has some work to do to get the interface and stuff going. Final Heart says, Chromebit seems fine as is, though the amount of new items she brought is a little disappointing. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we get a little cautious about having too much sort of fear of missing out. So I try to pick out a few exciting things for different players at different spots in the game as well. Definitely, if you're a mid-level player, I've seen a lot of great feedback about the tactical trap, just being able to kind of get a good jump start on a few areas by having something that's a little more powerful than you can usually get your hands on. Right about then. Chrome says, how about making Chrome bits drop throughout the year so that people who are normally busy this time won't miss out? Yeah, that's an interesting suggestion as well. I mean, it might kind of drift into the background a little too much. There's something fun and exciting about doing the same thing as a lot of other people at the same time. Kind of has that nice community vibe, or it's a nice topic of discussion to go over. Michelle's laughing about something. I'm having trouble following the chat. 240 people. Hello, everybody. I think that's why I'm having trouble reading all the chat, but I'm doing the best I can. Ryan says, perhaps Chrome treasure chests drop some Chrome bits to give people a chance to cover. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of interesting. It would sort of, in a way, remove some of the time gate, right? Because you could join maps and get bits awfully quick. Chris says, Dave, on the topic of skins, the team should host community competitions for skin submissions of LE traps. That'd be interesting. Somebody artistically inclined. I know we kind of browse the various mediums, whether it's Discord, Facebook groups, Reddit. So definitely people sharing suggestions in there, kind of slowly enter our subconscious mind when we're making decisions on priorities and what have you. Fire-breathing penguins, cool, says Jonathan. Someone's talking to Michelle. Brian says, you can upgrade Deathbot all the way up to Chrome Monsterbot. Can I use a Deathbot skin on my Chrome Monsterbot? Yeah, exactly. It's those little bit of questions that kind of need some design time to put into. So it's in the idea bank. It's not at the top of the list of priorities, but it is a topic of discussion that definitely comes up, and especially as release new upgrades for existing traps. And you have to kind of say goodbye to some of the skins that you loved. It becomes a natural topic of discussion again. So it's definitely something, too, the team discusses. I've said the word discuss a lot. we speak about quite a bit as well. In59 says, what about assignments to go catch all mice around the place that gives a bounty of Chrome bits like M400 style? The library assignments have a few rough edges. We're a little hesitant to add any more until we can kind of overhaul the area. And in some ways, I think maps filled. There's a lot of overlap between library assignments and maps. So it kind of almost sounds a little bit like a rainbow map where you're kind of going everywhere. But Chrome bits in a treasure chest, it's a pretty big change. It would definitely allow somebody to have a lot of bits. So it'd have to be kind of very carefully thought over, I think. Ayla LV says, I've returned to MouseHunt after about 5 years. How come Ronza offers so few original LE traps now? Just over the years, a little bit of feedback. There's still some LE traps, but we tend to as the years have gone by, it's become more and more difficult to work those LE traps into sort of the overall reward hierarchy. So as areas become a little bit more involved, as you get into higher level areas, and the time investment to earn various traps becomes a little bit longer, it gets hard to sort of add a trap that just costs gold where it sort of makes sense and it doesn't sort of take away from the equipment that you unlock with a large time investment. All of a sudden it's like, well, why would I go through the labyrinth? Why would I, bother getting those traps? Because, it takes a lot of time and effort, and then in comes something else and just instantly get something just as good. So it doesn't quite scale into the end game as well as it did perhaps 5, 6, 8 years ago. And so that's kind of why we've moved away a little bit from that. And the limited edition traps, they scale better at the early and mid game, where the time commitment on some of those upgrades isn't as heavy. And so that's why you see kind of those mid game LE traps come out. But the high end ones are mostly kind of upgrades for existing traps, that sort of thing, to not kind of diminish some of the accomplishment. As you put in all this time and effort, you're in this really cool, amazing trap, and you achieved it, and then in comes something, and all of a sudden that achievement starts to feel like, well, why did I bother? It kind of takes away some of the fun. And Ben says, R.I.P. Noxious School of Sharks. It was a great 3-year run. Yeah, at the same time, all good things must come to an end in some ways, but definitely it's a popular topic of discussion as upgrades come out about skins, so it's a great opportunity to revisit it. Chris says, on the Ronza topic, do Chrome Slayer scrolls still exist? They haven't returned for a while. Bryce says, getting Ronza's premium store kits as skins for floating island blimps would be fantastic. Okay, kits as... Oh, that's interesting. A little artistic inspiration. Yeah, all the supply kits are awfully interesting little pieces of art. I kind of like admiring them all. That would be... that's a great suggestion to use as inspiration for various dirigible cosmetics. We've had kind of positive feedback in using... kind of going back to older areas and reusing some of those supplies as a way to unlock a airship cosmetics, so that could be great inspiration for some of those areas. Alice says, any hint on the unopenable crate? It will be able to be opened soon, and it'll give you a little jump start on the Sky Palace, but it'll be nothing entirely game changing. And it's a little bonus on top for getting those 200 bits. I'd say you probably want to make sure you get 200 bits, but if you don't, you're not missing out on anything that you can't get anyway. Ryan says, have you considered bringing back a high luck, low power trade-off traps back? For instance, a 30 luck law trap, but just 3,000 power less. Might give us a fun decision to make. Yeah, it needs a little bit of exploration as well. Kind of, there's... hopefully, kind of as we have more bandwidth, want to kind of make that a little bit easier to ascertain, okay, what does power do for me and what does luck do for me? And I think as we kind of polish that out a little bit more, it'll help make that choice a little easier to make. Brian says, Elite Chrome maps are apparently coming the next Relic Hunter season. Last Dave updated. But not Chrome Slayer, I think somebody was asking about. But when we do... get to the refresh, maybe. We'll see. Sweet. Can we look forward to Chrome bases in the future? It would be nice to at least visually complete that set. But usually every year that idea gets kicked around a little bit. We can't quite find just the right way. So we almost don't want to do it until we have just the right idea for it. But we'll see. SGC says, I'm telling you, the crate is full of spiders. Let's hope not. Well, lots of great feedback, actually. I think the great takeaway there is making it more accessible. Kind of 2 weeks is a little short, potentially. When I think about Lunar New Year, the 2 weeks does feel a little bit short, but it's also an immensely rewarding event, so it kind of has to be short and sweet. So maybe that is one great benefit to that third week is, hey, if you're away for a few days, you feel like you didn't quite miss out on quite a big of a percentage of the total Chrome bits you can earn over that time span. So I think that's great food for thought. The next feedback topic I wanted to cover was area stats and state. So new if you haven't seen it already. And if you have access to the floating islands, or you have a friend who's in the floating islands, you can check out an Airship Hangar on your hunter profile, where you'll be able to see what your current airship cosmetic that you have equipped, as well as your collection of cosmetics that you have. And this was a little bit of a proof of concept, just kind of dipping our toe in the pool a little bit before exploring maybe a grander idea of every area, or any area where it's applicable, having the same sort of little spot where you can see some status. And if we went in that direction, maybe the hangar gets shifted a little bit more. Maybe you could see what island they're currently on as well. Like the ship is just floating next to that island. You could see just a little bit of state, things like in the warpath, being able to see, hey, what wave are they currently on? How many warpath victories have they earned? That sort of thing. Eventually maybe if we keep exploring it, adding a full section on the profile where you can browse without having to travel. You could see, okay, cool, Fort Rocks, these were the upgrades I built. That's where I left off. If I travel to Fort Rocks, I know what I'm going to see before I get there. Jit says the remake of the Ultimate Iceberg base was super disappointing. Makes the LE purchase a total waste. I wouldn't say a total waste. You kind of had early access to it, and so I think that's something we'd repeat in the future as well. Kind of, if there's a LE base and it's really a big game changer, as a few years come by, it's sort of it's reigned supreme, and it's time to let other hunters have access to that exact same piece of equipment. So you basically get to kind of enjoy that bonus. For a period of time, similar to the living base. It was the hothouse base, and then years later, in came the living base to kind of level the playing field a bit. Brian says having to know the iceberg depths and the Zugzwang's tower progress would be great as well. Absolutely. Long ago, I mean, I can't believe the mobile app. I think it was, was it 2016, 2014? I forget exactly there. I think it's an even number though. There's a spot on the travel section, and the original intention. See if I can launch this without it looking awful. In the travel section, originally, you'll notice there's some blank tabs when you go to travel. And one of those tabs was meant to be like a little miniature version of the HUD, so you could check out area status without having to actually travel there. But it just kind of never came to be. Johnson says, love those state status ideas, Dave. Alex has seen the state I left various areas in from the travel page would be great. SGC says, as someone who's lazy, I find the first time I go to some places, my adventure goal is often half done already. That could definitely happen a little bit with events. Some of the stuff, like discovering the source of cheese. And looking at the other side of that, well, if I got the cheese from an event, when I show up, do I really want to kind of get it again? It's kind of pros and cons. It says, love the new hangar. Team did a great job making that. And he says, shaking my head at the people buying the Ultimate Iceberg base was a waste. Well, you got to use it for several years to your advantage. But like I said, eventually all things become outclassed, given enough time. Chrome says, I would consider Zugzwang's ultimate move, the Warden Slayer and Anniversary Traps, as game-changing as well. Changes how hunters get the King Scarab. Yeah, there's a bit of a trade-off there, though, and you're getting kind of fewer overall resources. I know when I hunt the King Grub, I don't particularly like using the Anniversary Trap with kind of zero salt because I'm missing out on so many King's Crowns. I want to get all the other mice in the sand dunes, but so there's a little trade-off depending on what your objectives are. JY says, when will we see the Desert Heater base remade too? I can't say when, but those are the types of things that, hey, eventually they may find their way into the game because they're popular, beloved items by hunters. So as the years go by, there's more and more new hunters who have never gotten to experience that super fun and beloved item. And so it's kind of a nice way to introduce that. And maybe we can smooth out a few rough edges as well, kind of finalize exactly how we want to have a permanent home in the game. ALV says, is there any limit to Jade Base's incessant OP rise of one-upmanship? Probably not, but when the set gets completed, that might spell the end of that. We'll see. Nair says, the mobile app update would be awesome. Ryan says, yeah, as long as we have the ability to toggle it off for others to view, I'm all for making those stats available. That's interesting. Well, it's kind of your concern about making that viewable. KDM says, how does the hangar work? What if you're missing a piece of the set? That seems like a bit of an oversight we're looking into, is kind of how best to display if you have an incomplete set. Right now, I think it only shows if you've completed the set. Open to feedback on that, but kind of getting the sentiment, just kind of looking around quickly, that hunters would like to see an incomplete set. Wilson would say, I would consider the Scoundrel Slayer game changer too. Yeah, absolutely. At least with that one, though, eventually some traps will come out that even its special effect it'll be able to overcome. But yeah, for sure. I mean, we kind of curate as the years go by, and if there's a particular Ellie item that was just beloved, then we can kind of find a way to reimagine it in the game. So he says, I would definitely like to know how long the Forbidden Grove time limit without traveling there. There is kind of next best thing. We did add the timer to the description. So if I'm not mistaken, you'll be able to see that there. Let's check it out. I'm even going to use the seldom used search feature on the treasure, or on the map. So you can see it is closing in 41 minutes, and it'll give you the time in, well, UTC. But a more visual representation of that would certainly be 100 times better. Gaming says, are we going to have filterable maps anytime soon? Definitely we're starting to think ahead to Relic Hunter season as well. We've been collecting a lot of great feedback on the community maps feature. It's sort of out there in sort of MVP or beta, not quite beta, it's functional, but kind of minimal viable state. And we wanted to see how many hunters use it and sort of what question, how often it comes up as a topic of discussion. And we've seen lots of great suggestions. So that was a nice confirmation that it is something players are enjoying using, and so kind of put more time and effort behind improving it. Sean says, Dave, how far is your progress in the game? Pretty far. I think I have all the mice. Richard was the last one I needed. Coming along. Yes, indeed. That's usually my top goal, is getting all the mice. A Fulmina base. There kind of is one, the Denture base. Will kind of has a bit of a tie-in with Fulmina. Poke says, can we get the improvement on the Sunken City tab UI, which we could arm Smart Brilliant Water Jet Charms as well? Right now, a normal Water Jet Charm in the Anchor one. Yeah, it's been chilling out as well as a little quality of life improvement for that HUD. Final Heart says, what year might Extreme Salt Charms make their arrival? Hey, I'm always open to that suggestion, as I'm doing a lot of living garden hunting. Anything to, I'm always open to equipment for there. Chris says, I think Ronza kit should include area-specific auras. It's a little bit slippery slope to add too many auras. The more of something there is, the harder it gets to remember what they all do and where they are. So it's a little bit tricky there. And in some ways, we wouldn't want the trap to slowly just have all these circles piling up on them. When you have 20 auras going, it's a little bit like, what's happening here? Laura says, I like to mix and match on my dirigible. How will that show? Well, the image at the top there is your dirigible as you have it equipped. So it should show exactly how you have it equipped. But down below are all the sets you've collected. Bryce says, I did not know the description with the timer on the Grove was there. Yeah, it was added not too long. It was a fairly recent addition. Ziddle says, any plans for adding new bases with the effect of the Desert Heater base in different areas? It has been a very popular, well-loved item, and we've had positive feedback on almost utilizing that as a way. If there's a certain resource in a game that, or a resource in an area that eventually becomes not as impactful once you've unlocked everything you can do with it, maybe that's a great use for that extra resource. It's just you can arm a base and it slowly starts eating it up and gives you a little bit of something to help you work towards King's Crowns or get some bonus loot, achieve some other objective. Gee, 20 trap auras, that would be big. You know, when we were putting it together, we always kind of thought it could have a sort of I don't know what the name for that UI effect is, but sort of they're all stacked up, and when you hover over it, they sort of spread out. And so you can see them all, but then when you stop hovering, they all collapse back down and stack on top of one another. But all the same, hopefully we don't get to the point. Well, who knows what the future has in store, but at the moment anyway, all the auras do fit on the side there. But that would be a lot of auras to manage, I would think. Wilson says, hi Dave, any thoughts on having location-specific effects for non-LE traps during Ronza? Yeah, potentially. We always kind of brainstorm around a few things like that. Snowy says, any platinum base coming out of its hiding? Somebody scratched off a bingo card somewhere. No plans on the platinum base. Brian says, burn Fool's Gold in Queso Canyon on a new base and get the rib, eh? Yeah, Fool's Gold could use a little use. There's a few items. It's, exactly those types of things could use maybe a little bit of an extra use here and there. Mineral base, please convert minerals into something useful. Minerals do get used here and there. I think you can get... I guess you require the dragon scales as well, so that's a bit of a bottleneck, but I'm pretty sure the dragon banes cost dragon scales and minerals. I think. Mark says there's a tab dedicated to plank run pages. Seems like they're somehow unimportant. Is there future plans that pages have an impact on the game? Yeah, there have been some nice little ideas floating around, but again, no sort of priority to pushing that forward a little bit, but there's definitely been some ideas. It's in long needed an overhaul. They originally started out as sort of a way to help you learn crafting recipes, strategies, and then we just found better ways to do that. So heads-up displays, much more visual ways than kind of getting a page and reading it. So it was a little antiquated idea added to the game long ago. But I think it would be better reimagined as more sort of fun collectibles, ways to explore some lore, get a little backstory, complete some sets, and kind of have more of a collection-based push. And there's some ideas around that, but at the moment anyway, no immediate plans to be able to get that in. Jonathan says, crystal crucibles into something useful. You get more than you know what to do with. Not enough minerals. The only thing useful to do with them. You can make them into charms, but I think the recipe's a little prohibitively expensive, if you ask me. So I feel like that's why it's not too popular of use of crucibles, and you need so many other resources. It's kind of hard to balance that out. It'd almost be better if they just cost crucibles. Sand dollars need a new use as well. Eh? Well, you can always buy processors to sell on the marketplace. Frank says, I just want to see more crafting overall, combining really different items to make completely unique items, even if they aren't useful. Okay, interesting. Kind of the rule of thumb we've been applying. There's a few different ways to go about creating items, and they're all similar yet unique in their own way. There's the crafting table. When you go to the trapsmith, often if something costs items, then that's kind of a way you're crafting, or on a high level you're converting items into another item. Potions facilitate a kind of similar function where you pour in potion on cheese and it turns into a different type of cheese. And so kind of the rule of thumb we were applying there a little bit, if it's an item that's very specific to an area or two, it's the type of thing you usually only need it while you're at the area, put it in the shop. It's more visible. Kind of a little easier to see, and when you first show up at the area, you can browse the shop and get a sense of, hey, what's here? What's there to earn? What resources do I need? If it's something where you need it throughout the game, like maybe just a generic charm, where appropriate, maybe crafting is a little better fit for that, so you don't need to remember what shop sells that thing, where do I need to go? You can go to your recipe book, and you might make it in a different area at a different time. John says, please no more wealth charms. If you ever do have too many, make sure you convert them all up into the ultimate wealth charms, and you can use them up in a more reasonable time span. Jade says, are there currently any undiscovered crafting recipes? I don't believe so. Final Heart says, wealth charms already got mostly deleted from Spring Egg Hunt charge cycle ending. Yeah, fair enough. Jonathan says, for me, sand dollars have a new use. Buying a replacement School of Sharks to replace the one I chromed, and a replacement Rune Shark to replace the one I interned. turned my second into my School of Sharks. I think I read that entirely in the wrong order, but absolutely, that is part of the challenge and prestige of being a true collector. Is there are a few traps when you have to smash them to upgrade them. Going back and getting the original is kind of proving your fortitude as a dedicated collector. Uriah is asking for a mysterious Platinum Rift box. We did kind of explore it a little bit and ultimately decided not to do it. Senses, I always found it fascinating how higher level rank, how the higher rank, the more you can mix. There are such recipes. I never looked into that. Yeah, something a little antiquated all the way back to the laboratory. That came out 13 years ago, maybe. Well, that was the invention of potions, and definitely with the game having nearly 14 years of history, there's a lot of things that are a little antiquated or just kind of found better ways to do them as the time goes by. As you'd hope anything you do for over a decade, I would hope you kind of get a little bit better at it after 10 years when you look back on things you did that long ago. Elam says, I don't have any incentive on completing any set. It just costs resource for cosmetic. Yeah, fair enough. And that's kind of what they're meant to be. So there's different things for different types of players, and there's a lot of. It's kind of the nice thing about MouseHunt, and there's other games like that as well, where there's a little something for everybody. There's a big collection aspect to MouseHunt, but there's also some players like to play to optimize their time. Some players like to play kind of multiplayer. They really enjoy treasure maps as a way to make friends and play co-op experiences. So there's little different things for different people, and so in some ways it's nice, because if you tried to do it all, it might be a little bit overwhelming. So it's kind of, you get to focus on the parts that you really have fun doing. Gonzi Toon says, just give me your wealth charms if you don't want to spend them. Oh boy. Brian says, now that Spooky and its snowballed variants are on the marketplace, are there any plans to make Rift Spooky upgradable into Ultimate Spooky? Like for Rift Ultimate Spooky Snowball. Well, Halloween is coming up, so that's a good time to think about those types of questions. Why is the treasure trawler not tradable salvo? I just noticed I have over 1,000 of them. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I can't think of a good reason why it wouldn't be, but I so guess they're not. Vika says, really need area progress in one place, so you don't have to travel. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of support for that idea. It's kind of long overdue in a lot of ways as well. Wilson says, I like the HUD for Queso Canyon. Really need to be able to go to different areas quickly. Yeah, that certainly helps. Like eventually one day when we get to add heads-up displays to the tribal isles, that will go a long way just to be able to travel from the HUD and see the plethora of resources that there are to manage in that area, being able to see it all in one spot to kind of make heads and tails of it. With Spookies being upgradable, what about the party charms? I think the party charms already have that effect, unless I'm mistaken. I believe they can already turn into their higher tiers. Kind of every event pretty much now has its little take on that theme. Any news about Sky Palace, says Andy. And Sri says, would the rocket booster upgrade be a direct upgrade in the shop? Or will the community need to unlock the recipe? That's as good of a segue as any for a little behind the scenes. So the Empyrean Sky Palace. We took care of a few loose ends. There's a few little nail biter things to wrap up, but it will arrive on Tuesday, August 10, as Chrome Bits stop dropping. As well as Ronza's made a breakthrough in her rocket schematics, and she shared one more little piece of information that to successfully mount these rocket boosters to your balloon, you will need 500 sky ore and 500 sky glass. So make sure if you haven't already and you have access to the floating islands, go earn your high altitude flight license and make sure you have 500 of each ore and glass on hand to be all set to go to blast off on August 10. One little note as well to make is despite our best efforts, it just wasn't practical to get these Sky Palace mobile builds compatible and released ahead of time. So what's happened is they're uploaded, they're approved, they're all ready to go. But on release day, as we launch the Sky Palace, we're going to have to flip the switch right then and there. So there's be a little bit of a delay on having that propagate throughout the App Store and Google Play. So just a little heads up, if you hunt primarily on mobile, on the day of release of the Sky Palace, you're going to need to download an update, and it'll be available hopefully not too long after the release, once it propagates. We've done everything we can to have it ready to go. So we just have to flip the switch to let it go out. But if we released it ahead of time, unfortunately, there just wasn't a practical way that it wouldn't break the existing Floating Islands HUD. So it was a little chicken and egg problem, and just kind of this was the most practical solution to that. We did put out a build last week, though. There's a mobile update, and I'll have a little reminder. So if you do have the outdated version, it'll pop up, and it'll say, hey, to explore the Sky Palace, visit the App Store or Google Play, depending on which, whether you're on iOS or Android, and it'll link you straight to the shop as well, where you can check for the app update. And hopefully, like I said, it takes a little bit of time to spread throughout the world once we release it, but hopefully it doesn't take too long. Ooh, the banner change is oh so soon. One of the things I'm very excited about, although it doesn't necessarily it's not directly related to the Sky Palace, but with the release is the Skyfarer's Satchel will be added to the Floating Islands HUD. This thing is awesome. I'm loving it. Team had a great idea, pulled it off exceptionally well. Let's even take a look at it in action here. So when the Sky Palace comes out, the Floating Island HUD is going to have a little bit of an overhaul, and you're going to be able to pin different items and pick and choose what you want to see. I'm going to go with my preferred layout of how I like to hunt. So now if you want to see your troves, you can see your troves. If you want to see how many jewels you have, you can see your jewels. Sky Pirate Seals. Hey, cool and groovy. You can click it. You can open up your troves. If I had any, this is where I would put my troves if I had any. Here we go. I got some low altitude troves. So you can open it straight from the HUD. No jewel in that low altitude. Let me pry one open. Nope. Hey, got some bottled wind. All right. So I'm just loving this thing. It is fantastic. Gonzi says, I hope future content will be more adventurous, craftable items. We'll need multiple low drop rate items from different regions. That'd be so much fun. Haha. Well, sometimes what you think you want and what you do want don't always align, but the Shelter Egg might be evidence of that. Not gonna lie, that Sky Oculus start button is really unwieldy. Interesting. If you had like more crafting, less trading items with shopkeepers, nowadays the SS Huntington 2 would be a bizarre general purchase. Well, it's a little bit more approachable. Crafting has a lot of loose ends to it. And so kind of when we watch new players play the game, one of the things they struggle with most is crafting. Basically, if you're not on the wiki, if you don't Google something, you just can't figure out how to play the game. And so that's kind of bad. And so just for the long-term health of the game, it's sort of bad if people are unable to figure out how to just progress, unlock an upgrade, or even know that an upgrade exists. So it's tricky. I think crafting just has to be used for just the right type of thing. Gonzi says, can you give me 9k of those 99k ancient charms? Those are a go-to of mine when I'm testing things out. MouseHunt is going fully customizable. Gosh. One more little customization, I believe this is set to go out with the Sky Palace, unless I'm sorely mistaken, but I am fairly confident, is there will be a preference in your workshop to stabilize your airship. So if you're the type of person who leaves MouseHunt open in a tab, maybe it's in your peripheral vision all day, and you're like, oh boy, that airship is just bobbing up and down, and it is just driving me crazy out of the corner of my eye. You're going to be able to stabilize your airship, and it will cease its bobbing, as well as when you visit different areas, a few animations as well, and kind of like idle type animation, the type of thing that you might kind of see out of the corner of your eye, and it's just kind of trying to grab your attention. You'll be able to disable that as well. Ryan says, perhaps we could access the Sky Palace with a button when we bring up the Oculus initially. Well, you're going to have two pieces of equipment. You have your Skyfarer's Oculus, which you use with your Sky Map to explore regular floating islands or low and high altitude islands. And you're going to have a brand new piece of navigation device called your launch console. It'll come with the rocket booster upgrade when you build it. And that is how you're going to lock in some coordinates, blast off to even greater heights to explore one of the many vaults within the Empyrean Sky Palace. So that navigation control now, you have access to 2 different ways of taking flight. You can either use your sky map and your Oculus, or you can use your launch console and your rocket boosters. And the 2 do not affect one another as well. So if you shuffle the sky map and then you close it and you open up your launch console and you use cyclone stones in there, the 2 will keep their state. So you don't one doesn't affect one another, and that's kind of why they're separate concepts like that as well. Am I the only one who doesn't have sound? Let me double check on my screen share. I do have a microphone, so I'm hoping that's probably on your end. Final Heart says, want to reveal the extra rich cloud cheesecake recipe. I don't know, some things, unless you can spot it somewhere, might remain as a surprise. But one decision we did make was to use the cheese instead of the curd when you're making that. So if you already made cloud cheesecake, kind of you don't have, there's no sort of there's no sort of need to go back or anything like that. Basically, you can upgrade your cloud cheesecake into extra rich cheesecake. You make it from the cheese and not the curd. Ryan says, is there a Sky Palace adventure, a new adventure, or will build onto the current existing adventure? There will be a brand new adventure. And it will be called, let me double check here, Collapse the Empyrean Empire. And maybe we can just do a little sneak peek at the adventure. So there will be a new adventure. Collapse the Empyrean Empire. Relatively short, maybe, compared to the original Floating Islands adventure where you need to fully explore it. So a little bit like Queso Canyon in a way. It has spans multiple areas. This kind of spans multiple phases within the same actual hunting location. And so there'll be 2 adventures. And it's kind of nice from a narrative perspective and just as a nice piece of closure as well. One of the things we struggled a bit with the original adventure was there were 8 sort of main antagonists standing in your way. And so it didn't have that moment of like, I got the one final one to kind of wrap everything up. And so you'll have to complete the first adventure before you can start the second one. Because obtaining your high altitude flight license does require that you have finished the original Floating Islands adventure. So you can almost think of it as a nice end to the storyline. You feel like you've restored order. You defeated the final antagonist. Sila asks, sorry if this was answered earlier, do we get ore and glass in the Sky Palace? Absolutely. You can almost think of the Sky Palace as like an extra high altitude island, and you have a little better control over exactly what sort of modifiers and bonuses appear to explore on the island. So there is ore and glass. It has a new unique kind of area on the island in the vault to explore where you get ore and glass in the exact same tile. Let's see if I can even set one of those up. And we have done a little bit of a demo of this before, but I'm going to go ahead and build my rocket boosters. And we'll take a look at some sky ore and some sky glass. There you go, we'll lock that in. Maybe we can get one right in the front. So you can get sky ore and you can get sky glass, and it's in one single tile. So it's actually a great way. If you're not at level 9 Oculus yet, you need to stock up on some sky ore and some sky glass. It'll be a great way to kind of boost your collection rate. Just keep in mind you will need to finish the original adventure, so that will kind of come with a little bit of an Oculus upgrade along the path. Limbomber says, I missed the Chromebits feedback part, but I would love a daily max limit so it does encourage people to stay awake for longer to gather more and more Chromebits. That's an excellent suggestion, actually. Kind of a little daily quota of bits that you can recover, or if every day a few more fall from the sky. So you can go and you can find them all. Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Actually, that would kind of alleviate some little issues of like a kind of disparity of you get unlucky for a little bit too long or not. That said, it's a long enough event that it all kind of evens out in the end, but the drop rates could be a little bit higher that way as well. ALV says, MouseHunt was a big part of my childhood. Just want to say thanks for making such a great, unique game, and I'm delighted it has once again managed to capture my imagination. Well, it's very nice. I'm sure the whole team loves a sentiment like that. Welcome back, and I'm glad, too, we could capture your imagination. Randy says, interesting new randomizer. Yeah, you have a little bit more control or trying to find just the right type of island you want to set up or vault in the Sky Palace. Final Heart says, why does the adventure say unlock new traps on it? Uh-oh, that may very well be an issue. Actually, that was one little detail as well. I have to double check the unlocking hierarchy. So I might be a little I need a little audit on that. Veribus says, you need storm cells to hunt in the Sky Palace, and are those cells dropped by Paragons, Pirates, and Richard? Or are there other ways of getting them? I think he eagle-eyed the adventure there, as well as there'll be some kind of hints as well in the description of the high-altitude flight license, although that might not come until the Sky Palace comes. But that is kind of how your higher-level Oculus will help you in the Sky Palace. Is obviously you need to upgrade your Oculus to be able to hunt for pirates, and then you got to upgrade a little more to get the better pirates, and then you have to fully upgrade before you can hunt Richard. And so they all have those drops, and as you can imagine, they're set up in such a way where the more difficult ones probably have more storm cells or drop them a little bit more frequently. So a higher level Oculus will help you, but it will not be a direct requirement of visiting the Sky Palace. And there are ways when you do get to the Sky Palace, it will help you upgrade your Oculus. As we kind of looked at, you can get ore and glass there as well. How many high altitude island for one Sky Palace? There's no sort of direct, depending on sort of your prowess, how you go about it. There's a few different approaches we've taken, some more successful than others. But there's a few different ways to get there relatively quickly, or it takes a little bit longer depending on how you're going about it. But it's not quite like the high altitude islands where you need to defeat all 4 wardens before you can move up. It's you're trying to gather enough fuel, and so how you go about that are different ways of obtaining that fuel, the storm cell. It's kind of funny how much of the background art of the city is hidden by the interface. Yeah, it can be a little tricky at times. We'll say the mobile loading splash, which the art team's been doing a great job on, will be updated to have a little bit more visual of the city as well. So on launch, you'll be able to see that, as well as the login page. If you play on MouseHuntGame.com, kind of if you're logged out, the login page, kind of the splash gets used there a little bit. But other than that, we try to work the art in everywhere we can. Limbomber says, can we buy storm cells from the store by converting our extra glass or ore for it? No, you have to go forth and find them. So not a direct exchange, but it'll certainly, having that stuff will give you, you can buy other things to help you out. Jonathan says, I've been farming jewels for 6 months and have a total of 15. I need 225 farming jewels. Absolutely needs to increase much faster rate, something like 1 per day. Well, the palace is definitely a place where you can get jewels much more readily than on the low and high altitude islands. But I notice anything about jewels is not being answered. Well, as I just said, you'll be able to find, definitely be able to find jewels in the palace. There's a new tier of trove. And that one always contains at least 1 jewel. Jason asks, how many weeks out do you think Sky Palace maps will be? I don't quite know yet, but that is kind of a little follow-up project. We're going to be working on maps. We're going to get a lot of feedback, see how players kind of tackle the Sky Palace as well. It's a great opportunity to kind of do a follow-up project after release as well, so can't say with complete certainty But we're even exploring things like a Hollow Heights Grand Tour map as well. Kind of a Sky Palace-centric map, maybe an extra challenging Floating Islands map. There's kind of a lot of potential there as we sort of pull everything together. Floating Islands being such a massive area, so much to explore, uses all the power types. There's lots of creative ideas floating around about how to tackle the maps. Q says, what is the major feedback from the Nanian census? That's actually a nice reminder. That'd be a great topic for an entire Feedback Friday to dig into that. So I'll have to take note of that as well. Definitely require a little bit of preparation ahead of time. Actually, I meant to even share some Ronza stats, and I had completely neglected. Let me shift back to Ronza for a second. Michelle, yell at me if you don't want me to share how much gold she's earned. I think you might be doing a contest. Yell at me, Michelle. But the most popular shop item so far has been a Rift Charm, with over 9.1 million Rift Charms have been purchased from Ronza. Super Rift Vacuum is in number 2 with 3.6 million purchased. The most popular thing purchased with a voucher is the Chrome School of Sharks upgrade kit. And a Crate of Ultimate Charms is number 2. Lynn Bomber says, so you're saying we should save our pirate seals for new maps? I really don't know yet, to be honest. So we'll see. There is another seal item in the Sky Palace. That's another good candidate to potentially use for maps. There's a few other ideas floating around. So to be honest, no idea how the maps are going to be started. It's something we'll definitely be looking for feedback on after the Sky Palace comes out. Ryan says, apart from Treasure Trove, will there be other ways to get jewels, e.g. the Empyrean Seal or the Raw Ancient Jade? Yeah, absolutely. There'll be a few different avenues to go about getting jewels. Every palace run, you will get a trove if you fully explore it, which, unless you're using the wrong power type or something, would be a challenge not to at least fully explore it. But there's a few other ways as well as you're exploring the palace. Some interesting choices to make as you go, depending on sort of your play style, your risk versus reward tolerance, whether you like to kind of have slow and steady progress or whether you like to go all in and see if you get lucky. There's kind of an avenue for both of those play styles, and depending on which treasure vault you decide to loot in the Sky Palace. Gotta drop early. Keep up the good work, Dave and team. Thank you, Caleb. Sean says, a new map that needs locations progress on locations where you advance through certain themes. New friend says, how long do you think it'll take for the first hunter to complete the Sky Palace? Not very long at all. It's the type of thing you're meant to do many times, not just once. So I don't think it would take long at all. I think someone will complete the adventure within a few hours. Actually, come to think of it, yeah, it's a pretty safe bet. Now, gold is okay. It was the shop items you were going to comp. Michelle, what have I done? Well, I don't have specific quantities, at least. Hopefully you're doing a competition with specific quantities. But Ronza's ship is going to have a hard time taking off because gold is not exactly light. And she has over 562 billion gold coins somewhere shoved away in her ship right now. And there's just more being added by the minute. So I think she's going to need... Maybe that's why she's inventing the rocket boosters, is just something to get off the ground with all that gold in her ship. Gent says, I buy toothlets. That is a very popular Chrome bit purchase. I don't think it'll come as any surprise to anyone. That is number 1. In fact, if you look at a bar graph showing purchases, Fulmina's, the tootlet is this giant bar, and everything else just basically looks like a line. You almost have to remove it from the graph to be able to have a sense of scale between everything else. So definitely toothlets are all out. Toothlets probably the most popular. Yeah. Script Dev, hello to you as well, Script Dev. Always nice to see you. Ben says, a Hollow Heights Grand Tour map is just a lightning map with no monger or deep. Kind of. The lightning map covers a little more ground, though. Kind of says, are there more traps that will need jewels? No, none at this time. There's no planned. There are some new rewards to earn in the Sky Palace, primarily being able to acquire jewels quicker. It's a great place to collect jewels. But then nothing particularly new to then go and use those jewels on. There is one additional reward to earn as well, but you won't need jewels for it. And on that note, we should shift into trivia, as I'm losing my ability to speak here. This week's trivia question is, which floating islander mouse is described as happy-go-lucky? Here's a hint. I don't think a lot of floating island hunters are a big fan of this mouse. Brian comes in first with the kite flyer, although I'm going to give it to Ryan on a technicality for spelling flyer correctly. Although the kite flyer, I think that spelling would be like a brochure, a coupon, like a store's flyer. You're selling lots of, you're selling kites. Kite flyer, kite flyer, kite flyer. Ryan coming in with just in case saying daydreamer, but the kite flyer is indeed correct. The kite flyer is described as happy-go-lucky. Brian versus Ryan. They're both buzzing in quickly. I'll put that link in the chat as well for your clicking convenience. And that's a nice little final tidbit maybe as well, that extra rich cloud cheesecake that'll be coming out, and it'll be particularly useful in the palace, but it will have a use throughout the floating islands. It provides a power bonus, provides a luck bonus, and segue from the trivia, it will never attract a kite flyer or a daydreamer mouse, no matter where you're hunting. So if you do not particularly like seeing those mice cross your path, the extra rich cheesecake will be a way to avoid hunting those two particular mice. And Hermanny says, wow, thanks for the jewel, Dave. I can't be tricked anymore. We updated the tool that makes those links to make sure there's nothing too over the top in the list of items. So the extra rich will pack quite a punch throughout the floating islands. That said, it's arguably most useful in the palace. So if you're just going to pick one spot to use it, definitely save some for the palace. It's kind of good to know as well with the launch of the floating islands, just the setting of it, or the setup of it. A lot of hunters kind of dove in and went on to an island straight away and realized, like, oops, I forgot to make cheese. So we've added a few kind of little subtle warnings, because it's not a requirement, but it's strongly recommended. So we've carried those over as well for the Sky Palace. So hopefully that kind of gives a little bit better of a heads up, because similar to the islands, when you do reach a vault, you cannot retreat until you encounter the Empyrean Empress when you're exploring a vault. Owen asks, Dave, what was the least purchased item from Ronza? Oh, why isn't this working correctly? I looked at it yesterday and it was working, but I don't think that's correct. It wasn't magic nest dust. I don't quite trust that. Maybe I was looking at something else. Maybe I was looking at the voucher. Looks like magic nest dust is not particularly popular though. And Brian, maybe a final question to end off here. How many new mice will there be in the floating islands in total? Will floating islands finally surpass the sunken city as an area with the most mice? I believe it will. So I've captured all the mice, so I'm not going to share my screen when I do that. But the floating islanders group is now 71 mice strong. I've captured 70 out of 71. Which mouse am I missing? Oh, that makes sense. There are now 71 mice in the Floating Islanders group, whereas the Deep Sea Dwellers has 60. So that is definitely setting the bar quite high for a single area. I mean, it's got a ways to go before it'll touch the event mice category, but in terms of mice per a single area or maybe involved in an adventure, that sort of grouping, but doesn't quite dethrone Rift Walkers as the largest mouse group that there is. But the Rift Walkers does span quite a few areas. And some will be a little bit more straightforward to encounter than others, but none are totally out of reach. Some quick math going in the chat to discover the number of new mice. All right, well, hunters, I'm going to wrap things up on that note. One more quick reminder as well, just when we're looking at the Sky Palace coming on Tuesday, if you do play often from the mobile app, we have to, unfortunately, just technical limitations, we're going to have to publish the update at the same time that the Sky Palace is released. So you'll have a little message in your app if it's up to date saying, hey, the Sky Palace is here, visit App Store, Google Play, and we're hoping that'll propagate rather quickly, but you will need to download that update on release date to be able to use the Sky Palace on mobile. That said, the rest of the floating islands should work a-okay. But thanks for joining me. Have a fantastic weekend. If you're watching it recorded, have a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, whatever you happen to go on. Happy hunting. I'll see you next time.
Such a beautiful you. You're the master of the mausoleum. Look at me, barely at level 3. I am begging for a piece of gold. All the mice, all the terrible mice that you naturally attract to you. I wait with the trap and the bait and the button. I'm waiting on a mouse today. Anyhow, will be just fine. I may not be a hero, babe, but I'm willing to give it a try. I'll lay my trap, my arms, and you will be my spot, and I won't care. Such a beautiful you. I am caught up in the crazy game. Look at me, barely at level 3. I just know I'll never be the same. All the mice, all the terrible mice. If I had my way,